Today, we're going to study arrays. An array is a group of variables of the same type. If you remember, when we were discussing variables, I told you that a variable is a kind of a case where one value can be stored, but only of the data type this case is designed for. An array is then a box of storing those cases of a given data type and of a certain size. In order to create an array, the following construction is used. First, write the type, then square brackets, then a space character, the name of the array, a sign symbol, new, the data type again, square brackets, and within them, the array size. Let's say we need an array of storing the number of days in each month. It will be created this way. Int, square brackets, array name, days in month, a sign symbol, new, int 12, for the 12th month of a year. Now if we want to put a value into this array, we must address a slot in this array by its index. Array indexing starts with 0. It means that the indexing of January will be 0, of February 1, of March 2, and so on. To populate an array which is dedicated to January with the value of 31, we will write the following construction. The name of the array, days in month, square brackets, in which the index must be specified. We will need index 0. Assign the value of 31. Let's go to the code and see what it looks like there. Create a new project. And call it first array. Create a new class. Let it be called first array. Add a program entry point and create an array. Int, square brackets, days in month, a sign symbol, new int, the size of the array in square brackets. Now assign values to every element. Days in month of 0, assign 31. Days in month of 1, assign 28. Don't forget that indexing starts with 0. It means that the last element will have the index of the array length minus 1. Now let's print out a value. In order to print out a value, the same syntax is used. For example, let's display the number of days in March. Create a new variable, call it March. Assign symbol, the array name, the index of element, the value of which we need it. March will have index 2. So let's print out this variable. Run the project and see that March has 31 days. Let's now print out all the values of the array. Create a for loop. Variable I will be initially equal to 0. Our loop will be executed while I is less than 12. Since our last element is 11, it is where the loop will be broken. After executing the code, I must be incremented and the value of days in month array must be printed out. We will print out the element, the number of which equals to I. I hope it is all clear. First, we will assign I the value of 0 and execute it, while I is less than 12. Let's print out the value. Initially, we will print out the value of days in month of 0, that is 31. Then, we will increase I by 1 and print out the value of days in month of 1 and so on. Let's run the project and make sure all our values have been displayed. Now let's alter it. It will be not less, but less or equal. It means that the last index which is going to be addressed will be 12, but it's not in the array. Let's run the program and take a look what's going on. And we're having an error. It often happens so that programs fail, and when we need to understand what's happened, we can open the log and read its contents. Here we have an error, out of bounds for length. The index is 12 and the array length is 12. And we know that if the array length is 12, its last index will be 11. To avoid this, it's best not to specify a value as we have just done. Instead, we can query the property of the array which shows us the number of the elements in the array. Let's delete less or equal and number 12. Instead, we will write the array name, insert a dot, and see the first property of those suggested to us, length. Press tab. Run the program and you can see that everything works. This way is better because if somebody accidentally adds an additional element, for example, let's add element 12, so that our array consists of 13 numbers. And now we do not have to modify the loop because it utilizes the array length property. Let's run the program again, and you will see all the elements displayed including the last one. What do you think will happen if we forget to assign values to the array elements? Will there be an error? Let's run the program and see that there is no error, but we have only zeros displayed. This happens so because when an array is initialized using the keyword new, default values are assigned to all the elements of this array. If this is an array of numbers, zeros are assigned to all the elements of the array. If it's a Boolean array, all the elements will be false. If it's a reference variable, we have not yet studied this type, but we're going to do this later. It will be assigned null value. Let's delete all the code and create a new array of 100 numbers. Call it nums. Type the assign symbol, new, int 100. Assign it the values from 0 to 1000 with the interval of 10, which means that the first number will be 0, the second 10, the third 20, and so on. It will take too long if done manually, so we will use a for loop. Create the loop for int I equals 0. I is less than nums.length, then is less than the array length, nums I++. Now we must assign values to the elements of the array. Type nums of I, assign symbol. We need all the elements to be assigned values in numerical order, but with the interval of 10. So we'll type I multiplied by 10. It means that the first element will be assigned the value of 0. I will be equal 1, and the element with index 0 will be assigned to the value of 1 multiplied by 10. That is 10. Now let's create a loop to print out all the elements of the array. For int I equals 0, I is less than nums.length I++. Print out nums of I. Run the program and check that everything works. The following numbers are printed out: 0, 10, 20, 30, and so on up to 990. During our lesson on loops, I told you about the fourth type of loops, a special kind of for loop which is called for each. Today we can study it because it's used in working with arrays. Also, keep in mind that this loop can only be used if you will not modify the array, that is, if you will not assign it new values. When we take a look at the previous two loops, we can see that in the first one, we altered the array by assigning it a new value. It means that in this case, for each loop would not do. In the second loop, we simply put in values, which means that the array itself is not modified. So we can use this special type of for loop for each. The syntax is as follows. You will also type 4 and I. It's just what you already know. Then type a semicolon and the array name curly brackets. So what does this loop do? It takes all the elements of the array one by one and assigns them to variable I. After this, we can work with this element. In our case, we wanted to print out all the values of the array. Let's do it. Simply type sout I and run the program. As you can see, the result is the same. This is a convenient type of looping, as we will not exceed the array boundaries, and we do not have to address every single element by its index. Instead, we get the values directly. But I must remind you that this is not the way to assign the values or somehow modify the array. There is one more thing to keep in mind. For example, our array will not be int, but char. Let's call it chars. Assign some elements. It doesn't matter how many. Now we'll print out all the elements using for each loop. Since we are dealing with a char array, all its elements are of char data type. Therefore, if we want to extract one of the elements and assign it to a variable, this variable must be the same data type as the array. In this case, it should look like this: char ch in array chars. Let's print out this variable. It means that the type of the variable in for each loop must be the same as the array type. Run the program. We cannot see anything printed out because we used char type with a null value in it. So this should be enough on this topic. It's time for the homework. You will create an array of numbers and using a loop initialize it with values from 100 to 1000. After this, you will create a second array of the same size as the first one. Use the array property .length to initialize it with the same values, but in a reverse order. You must get the values from the first array only. You must not initialize the second array anew with the values of 1000 to 100. Finally, you will use for each loop to print out the values of the second array. Here is a hint. In order to address the elements from the array from its end, you can add one more variable to for loop, and this variable will be initially assigned the value of the last index, and then step by step its value will be reduced. To achieve that, specify the needed variables separating them by commas. The syntax will look like that. If initially our loop looked like this, and we need to introduce one more variable, we can declare it after a comma. For example, j assign symbol 1000. Thus, we can address a j element of the second array. As we must decrease values in the second array, insert a comma and write j minus minus. This task is quite difficult. At first glance, it's not obvious how it is to be solved, so I will show you the solution. But first, you should try to solve it on your own. If you fail, check out my solution and then try to reproduce the whole code all by yourself. Once the task is completed successfully, come up with a couple of more tasks and try to solve them so as to have more experience with arrays. Once you're good at this topic, you can proceed to our next lessons. I will allow you some time to pause the playback and solve the task. Good luck! So I hope you have completed the task. Delete all the code. First of all, we will simply create an array of numbers. Its length will be 900 elements. Let it be our first array, so call it first and assign it 900. First equals new int 900 semicolon. Having done that, create a loop which will assign values to the elements of this array. Since we must have the values from 100 to 1000, we will assign the value of first of I, assign value I plus 100. Thus, index 0 will be assigned the value of 100, index 1 will be assigned 101, and so on. Now let's create our second array, call it second, and assign new int. In this case, we will not explicitly assign it the value of 900, but we would rather refer to the length of the first array, first.length semicolon. Thus, we will make sure that our second array has the same length as the first one. If by some accident the number gets somehow altered, our program will not fail. It will keep running. Now create a new for loop, which will let us assign values to the elements of the second array. So we'll take the elements of the second array one by one, but in reverse order, and assign them the values of the first array in direct order. Therefore, we will need two variables. One of them will store the index of the first array from its beginning, and the second variable, let's call it j, will store the indices of the elements in the reverse order. Since our last index equals array length minus 1, we will write just that, first.length minus 1. Once we have completed our first operation, that is, we have taken the first element of the first array and assigned its value to the last element of the second array, we will need to increase the value of I by 1. We have done this here. Also, we must decrease the value of j element by 1. Let's do it. Type comma j minus minus. Let's do what we're asked to do. We will take the second array, take the j element, which in this case is the last one, and assign it the value of I element of the first array. So let's take another look at what's going on here. First, I equals 0, j equals 899. We're taking the value of the index 0 of the first array here and assigning it to the 899th element of the second array. We are doing it here. Then we are increasing the value of I by 1 and decreasing the value of j by 1. Now I equals 1, j equals 898. Take the 898th element of the second array and assign it the value of the first element of the first array, and so on. Thus, our second array will fully consist of the elements of the first array, but in a reverse order. All that is left to be done is to print out the elements of the second array. Since we're not going to alter it, we will use for each loop for that. For int I in second. Let's print out the value of variable I. Run the program. Everything is fine. Everything is working. Should anything be still unclear to you, watch the lesson once again and you will figure it out. The topic itself is not complicated, but some things may seem confusing at first. Once you feel confident with arrays, go on to our next lesson. See you later.